Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. Today, for the first time ever, live from my home/studio behind the great big blue wall of New Mexico. Trying to keep New Mexico tactical. Today, I wanted to talk about our community. And I don't mean just like my community in Northwest New Mexico. I want to talk about the 2A community. You know, there's a lot of good in the 2A community that people don't talk about. We're always demonized. But if you think about our culture, the American culture, the 2A is embedded in it. It's one of our natural rights. It's one of our founding principles. And as Dave Chappelle liked to say, the Second Amendment is in there just in case the other ones don't work out. Now, as crime starts to rise, especially in blue states like New Mexico, it becomes increasingly clear that we need to start defending ourselves. It's in New Mexico, we don't have as many problems with law enforcement as other places do. And I'm not being a bootlicker. I do have some issues with New Mexico law enforcement, specifically New Mexico State Police, because they're the ones that enforced our mandates here in New Mexico that were some of the most draconian mandates in the Union. So, what can we look forward to me starting to try to do this live stuff? Well, I'm doing the live stuff because, well, I walked away from a position of 12 years, and I really am waiting for some capital that I've invested in so I can start another business while I continue doing this. But let's talk about that community more. Name one thing that isn't more iconic than John Wick's pistol. Or the fact that Red Dawn, you saw Kalashnikovs for one of the first time in the United States. Name a movie with a really bad dude. Do you remember the gun? I bet you if you look at a lot of movies, you'll see a lot of Sig Sauer 5.52s and 5.53s as their bad guy gun. It's one of the things I hate because I've always loved the Sig. But if you look at our history, our founding fathers intended for us to be able to defend ourselves because there was no such thing as law enforcement. And they intended us to be able to go out and actually defend ourselves against our government. Our founding fathers were very intelligent, despite any shortcomings that some people may have about economic issues that they had when they were founding our country, specifically slavery. Now, there are a lot of virtue signaling people that say, ooh, gun bad. But when I see gun, or a gun, even in open carry, because, you know, in New Mexico it is open carry, and you can carry everywhere that allows you to, the only thing that stops you is private property in New Mexico. That means if they have a sign, you're not supposed to carry on that place. That also means that the federal laws apply, that you can't carry into a bank, you can't carry into a mail facility, you can't carry into a school. Freemen don't ask permission. You do you. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just going to tell you that it's increasingly aware. I'm becoming increasingly aware of places like the rest of the world, especially in the United States, anywhere that's really heavily Democrat-controlled or leftist-controlled, crime is at a meteoric rise. I don't know how many times we hear about stolen items, stolen cars, specifically in New Mexico from Albuquerque. I know of a couple of shootings, and now I'm hearing more and more shots as I listen to the radio at night. I listen to the police radio just because it's kind of entertaining in between other things I do. But our community, think about it. How many times have you seen raffles for little league teams or youth sports teams, or they're going to on a trip, and they decided to raffle off a gun. And why? Because they get us to go apply. They get us to go buy it, and it sells tickets. It supports them. How many times have you been to Sportsman's Warehouse in New Mexico and you found a sports team there, or a Boy Scout team or a Girl Scout team out there selling their product, whether it's donuts or cookies, to us directly? They're directly marketing to us because they know how we react to charities. The 2A community is just as broad and diverse as the biker community, as the motorcycle community. And in fact, there's a lot of overlap. If you're found in the 2A community to be sick, more often than not, we're going to rally around you. The 2A community is a community that we can't let get infiltrated, and it has been by politicians for many, many years. That's why I started the New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I started the New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union because specifically in New Mexico, there's a group of people that like to demonize us 2A people. Now, I've lived in the Southwest my entire life, and anyone who's been an avid user of, or avid listener of New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union, they know that. I love my state. It's one of the hardest things that if I do have to leave, I don't want to. It's not something I want to do. That's why I'm starting a new business now, in addition to podcasting here, because I love my state. I just hate the government here. But you open a book. You know, James Bond was a book before it was a movie, and the iconic Walther PPK was there in the book. If you look at some of the reading material passed down to kids, while a lot of it lately we all go, whoa, holy crap, what is this doing in a school book? There's actually books about things like the brown bess. Now, I've covered the brown bess in this podcast before. It was one of the first rifles in the United States, let alone technically for its day, probably one of the most iconic, celebrated, and demonized at the same time. It could have been the first assault rifle because it was that ubiquitous and that well used. But let's go to comic books. For years, there were lefty guys in comics, and there still are a lot of them. Check out Eric July's stuff for the Rippaverse if you don't want to see that crap. But you didn't see a lot of realistic gunplay. You saw the guns in the background. It wasn't until recently where artists got really good that you could start seeing firearms and be able to identify them in animated formats. Look at cartoons. I'm a fan of Rick and Morty, and I can tell you that they like using Glock pistols and M4s or AR-15 rifles in the stories because you see the cops, you see law enforcement. You even see Rick, to some extent, using a Glock. You go on to video games. Man, if the video games are the second wave of the newest gun users we have. Now, I say that because my kids have been playing video games for many, many years. And I've played it, but not as much as they have, mostly because I don't like the controller. I'm a keyboard warrior, so to speak. I'm an ex-computer guy. But what I love about this is they show off the guns that all the kids want, but don't have access to. Now, it would be great if they repealed the NFA, and later I'm going to do a podcast for one of the other podcasts I do called the My Unrealistic Christmas List. But it's interesting. And then you go into modern movies. How iconic is John Wick? How iconic is it that he goes in to the sommelier, and the sommelier is actually a gun guy? This could have been any of us that are in the know behind a gun counter. And I'm advocating for Ian from Forgotten Weapons to be one of the next John Wicks, because that would be amazing seeing Ian as a sommelier. I don't have as breadth of knowledge as Ian, but a lot of people say I do. I've been called the Othnius of some places. I know a lot about firearms, mostly because this has been a passion for my entire life. But as I look forward at culture and where we're going, I want to see it not demonized anymore. We aren't the bad dudes. We aren't the criminals. We never have been. All we've ever wanted to be was to go out, shoot once in a while, hunt, be able to own and collect what we like. Some people are into hot rods. Some people are into dolls. Some people are into, firearms. Now, there's something that I think is really hilarious, and there's a guy on YouTube, and I think his name is Bear something, but he's talking about one rifle. Dude was right. The gun industry hooks us in these different little moments where we think we need this type of gun for this scenario. In reality, let's think about that. Are you going to get into those scenarios? Do you need a truck gun because you're going to clear houses or you need it to get there? Now, for someone like me, a truck gun is more so a way to get home. So I want something small, compact to get to where my other stuff is. I call them 3 working rifles. And when I say that, it depends on what I'm going to go into if those scenarios ever happen. Speaking of those scenarios, anyone hoping that those scenarios ever happen hasn't looked across the world to see what happens when those scenarios type of things happen in the rest of the world. If you look at civil wars, can you imagine what China would do if the guys went out there? They're not armed. They don't have the Second Amendment. Imagine what kind of smackdown they're going to get from the government. Our government has proven that the FBI is willing to be used as the new Nazi force in the United States to come after American gun owners. That's why I'm not a big fan of the Alphabet guys. Now, I have interviewed Brad, who is a former FBI agent, but I get the feeling that even he is going, holy crap, what have they done to my boy? And what I mean by that is I know a lot of field agents, and I say a lot, probably about 5 or 6. And in northwest New Mexico, in a tiny town that I am in, that's saying a lot. That's because I've got to meet a lot of the FBI agents. That's why I have a problem with saying, don't back the blue. I've met law enforcement. One of my really good friends is the sheriff of San Juan County. And I say really good friends. I've known him since high school. I work with the guy. The guy is a really good guy. He's trying to do the best he can. He has to walk a tight line because of politicians. Now, we need to say, no, we're not doing this anymore. We are not giving up our rights because, point of fact is, they've been here all along. You have a problem with it. I don't. And those of you in larger cities that have a problem with me owning a firearm, you need to look at where we live, where I live. Specifically, it isn't that I've said this ad infinitum, and my listeners to this point know this, that if you go out and you start messing around here and we have to call the cops, we're looking at 10, 15 minutes easy, sometimes 30 minutes, and it's because there isn't enough law enforcement hired and running at any given time because no municipality in New Mexico can afford to have this police force they need. They have to do it in stages or shifts. The same with any other place. But in New Mexico, what gets us is geography. And, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6 any day of the week. And when I say that, I mean it. I'm not going down without a fight. I know that my law enforcement friends here, some of the trainer guys that I've went to get training with, would tell me, no, you fight it out. You may get hit, but at least you have a chance. If you don't, you're going down. So, let culture be influenced by us, but let us guide that culture. Let us start looking and showing people what kind of good we do. Advocate, but be the best stewards of the 2A that we can possibly be. How do we do that? Well, don't be a jackass. For one, we need to start talking to the left, and we need to have some honest conversations with them. Because what happens is they come after us, they start talking to us, and then they use the wrong vocabulary, and it throws a kink in how we're communicating. Now, the left is notorious about changing definitions. More specifically, now they're trying to change the definition of a woman. Now, think about that. We're fighting a battle, and a lot of you people on the right, where I said is more so libertarian right or conservative right. Nowadays, they would call me alt-right freak. Although I am Hispanic, I have zero problems with any race or any other culture. My problem is I don't agree with I'm not a statist. I don't agree with the government ever intervening in our rights. And I have a real problem with them saying what I can and can't own. So, to that end, I do what I need to do. I stay out of trouble. And I'm a collector, if anything else. Based off of that the conversation I had in my head, seeing that Bear Guy's video about owning one rifle for everything. Now, why I said I have 3. In his video, he talks about specifically being able to hit at 1,000 yards. Well, I've done that, and I can do it from different ranges, different angles, different whatever. That's because that was my dad's big go-to, and I learned how to do it then, and I used to shoot competitively for a little bit for long range from 0 to 1,000 meters. So one of my working guns is a 308. It's not a 6.5, and I'm not a big fan of the 6.5 caliber. I am a fan of the 6mm or 6.8 bullet because it's a 270 bullet. I think it's ironic that we're going back to technology or bullets that were designed in the beginning of smokeless powder rifles. So it's interesting that everybody wants the ballistic coefficient of the 6.5. Well, the 6.5's been around for a long time. The Swedes, the Italians, Mauser, the Japanese, they all looked at 6.5 because they were looking for something that would do the job for a military cartridge, but not brutalize you with recoil. And what we find later is that the 6.5 bucks the wind really well, where the 30 caliber, which seems to be a big thing in the United States, but not in a lot of other places, the 30 caliber bullet is a go-to for the United States. There's a ton of bullet selection for the 30 caliber, the 308 type. So 308, 30-06, 300 Win. They all have excellent bullet selection. I have an AR-15 that I built that I so lovingly call it my Wick build. And I built it on a budget, but it's built after what John Wick or Taran Tactical's AR-15 is. Now, everyone that's shot mine likes mine. Of my friends and my family, it is a remarkable piece of equipment. And the last one, people laugh at me for this one, but is a Wasser 10 Kalashnikov AK. Now, I have 5.56 AKs, I have 5.45 AKs. Why do I have a Kalashnikov in what I consider a working rifle? Well, ammunition is a thing, training is a thing, and there's a cool thing about having standardized on 3 basic calibers, which I have. 5.56, 9mm, 308. And I have AKs to train with and use just like that. But there comes a point in time that if you're going to hunt and you're hunting deer in light brush, a 308 may not be the best option. You want a littler, lighter rifle. Okay? 7.62x39, I've dropped deer with back when I had my SKS, and I've done it with my Kalashnikov. It can do the job very well on a mule deer. Okay? If you had to buck the system, get away from everyone, and an SHTF type of thing, the Kalashnikov is one I would really consider very heavily because it's one of the most easy to find ammunition sources in the United States, only giving way to the 5.56. The 5.56 is America's modern cartridge. We use it in just about every gun platform we can think of, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's a lot of bad press around the 5.56, but if you know shot placement and what it can do and the recoil around it, there's a reason why The 5.56 has been around for 70 years in the United States parlance, military parlance for use. You can carry a lot of cartridges. It's low recoil. There's decent bullet selection. But where I live in northwest New Mexico, if that was at that point where I had to leave the system, so to speak, there's such a thing as a deer or an elk, or now even moose. And if I have to fall one of these to save my family and, feed it, a 308 is a hell of a lot better at doing that. To that end, I like the G3 rifle. I've always been a huge fan. We will see how it goes. I think that I'll never have to worry about that. My carry guns are 9mm, and now that I'm free and clear, I can carry my 9mm, and I am ecstatic. So welcome to the Union. Welcome to let's talk about that name, New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. Now my longtime listeners know, New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union comes from AK Operators Union. Way back in the gap when this was originally designed to be this group was designed to be a protest group to go meet those people in the roundhouse in Santa Fe. I had asked Robski from AKOU because I wear his kit. I love his show. Him and Ula are great. Most of my AK accessories come from New Mexico, or from AK Operators Union. Robski's a cool guy. And once he found out what I was doing, he's like, go ahead. Now, I haven't asked him about the podcast, but I have no doubt that he would be happy to see someone inspired by him, so much so that they try to go do this. So I've rambled along for 22 minutes and 18 seconds for my first live podcast. I'm going to end it by saying, look us up on every podcasting platform. For video, we do try to put weekly video up on rumble.com. Our podcast can be found on YouTube. It doesn't have video in YouTube, mostly because YouTube is really anti-2A, where Rumble isn't. We have a Twitter presence, or I have a Twitter presence, Spawn082 if you want to catch me on Twitter. If you want to catch me on Facebook, we have the New Mexico Black Rifle Operators page there. Podcasting will be Monday through Friday, except for this Friday because of Christmas Eve. And as we're going into the Christmas holiday, I'm going to try to take some time and spend it with my family. So I'm going to tell you the same things I tell you all the time. Like, share, subscribe, Rumble if you find our videos on Rumble. Be great.